everyone, I'm Daamia Doshi and I'm a second year law student. Fun fact about myself, I'm a classically trained Kathak dancer and I also broke my leg once doing yoga.
What I don't know why, but I'm specifically interested in like hearing a bit more about the breaking of the leg. But I guess what was the
Okay.
purpose which caused the leg?
Um, so this was back when I was in school and we used to have this mandatory yoga period and it was, I think it's called the Garudasana, where you wrap one leg around the other.
Hmm.
And I think I lost my balance and I fell to one side. And all of the pressure came onto my left knee. And it just sort of went, well, it just moved. And then it didn't
Wow.
move back. So that was problematic.
Wow. And how long did it take to recover from this broken leg?
Uh, Almost about 1.5 months, or two if you count physio. But yeah, it was, it took a while.
Wow. And that period was like a lot of Netflix and a lot of pampering, and I'm assuming.
It was, but it was also that I had to miss out on a lot of school.
Hmm.
And I had to miss out on, my birthday was me in an immobilizer around my left leg, so that wasn't fun.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting story, I guess. There's both happy and sad aspects, but like
Yeah.
that's an interesting fun fact to start this episode on. Just to quickly introduce you to listeners,
Mhm.
this is, as you've said, that's Daamia Doshi. She is a second year law student at the National Law University, Odisha. So that's NLUO for short, because that's way too long a name for me to continuously be saying. So that's in the city of Cuttack, Odisha. Today, we'll just be hearing more from her about choices she's made, lessons she's learned along the way, as well as advice and insight for young high schoolers listening to the episode. Anyone who's interested in potentially getting into a similar path. What I would love to be talking about is stuff which like you wish you could tell yourself. Let's say you rewinded 2 or 3 years back in time. And so hopefully the high schoolers listening to that have this resource which like I didn't have or you didn't have when we were entering university. So yeah, welcome to Uni Unveiled. I'm your host Arya Road. I currently study at Minerva University, and welcome, Damia. Excited for to hear a lot more. I don't even know the ABCs about like how law works in India, but I'm hoping we can have like a very basic, clarifying conversation, which like builds up in terms of intensity.
Yeah, honestly, thank you for having me here. I am super excited.
Awesome. I think I'll dive right into it. It's been, you're in fact back for your second year. You finished an entire year of the highs and lows, which is like the whole freshman year of university. If you had to describe it in like 2 or 3 sentences, how was that first year experience for you?
Chaotic and eye-opening.
Hmm. What
Yeah.
what was like? In what way did your eyes open? Like, what was eye opening?
I think it was less towards things that already exist in the world and more towards how I react to situations. Because, you know, I have lived all of my life in one city. I'm a proper Hyderabad girl,
Hmm.
born and brought up.
Hmm.
I don't know the world outside. I didn't want to know the world outside. I was really intent on staying in the same city. And having to move to a completely different state, which I don't know much about, the language barriers, the personality barriers when you meet people with different cultures, it does get to you. You feel homesick,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of things, and you realize probably some inner strength that you don't think that you have. But it takes for you to step out of that boundary and for you to push yourself to understand that there's a lot more to you than you know.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I mean, I can relate. I think we're in a very similar position in terms of like we both have finished the first year. I could relate. You brought up a few memories of my first year. I want to spend 2 minutes on this like inner strength. And so what you're saying is like once you get out of home and you sort of throw yourself into a new environment, you sort of achieve things which you thought were otherwise like you were not capable of. Do you say that
Yeah.
that's correct?
Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate that my parents have raised me to be a very independent person. Things such as a work with the bank or, probably filing out your Aadhaar form online. Things like this, I'm well equipped with. But what you're not well equipped with is dealing with people, such as asking someone to clean your room, how much are you supposed to, if you have to pay them something, what is offensive to say to them, what is not offensive to say to them, the boundaries that you're supposed to have with your peers, with your seniors, with your faculty, because the structure in a university is quite different, because in a school it's all peers, maybe there's a 1 or 2 year age gap, but here the professional space, it does not allow you to have that sort of comfort.
Hmm.
You're always, supposed to have your back straight. You're always supposed to be proper and trim. And you can't act as if this is your home, because it really isn't.
Hmm. Yeah, I observed
Yeah,
this as well. Is sort of I would have very few moments just alone. Also because even if it's like I'm getting ready for bed, I'm still with my roommate, and so I can't be like sort of
exactly.
doing everything I was doing back in my room at home. I still sort of have to be speaking properly and sort of like
Exactly.
putting on some sort of like a good face or good behavior. It's
Mm.
not. I think once I came home, I really like let it all loose and like was back to my old self.
Yeah.
But it's very different at university in that sense. Like I think I completely agree. We spoke about some element of, as you said, cultural shock and language shock.
Mhm.
Apart from that, any other things that were very surprising or very shocking, like anything you weren't super prepared for when you sort of jumped into this new world of university?
I think it was, you know, the sheer amount of things that you have to handle all at once. Like
Hmm.
it's everything happening all at once, and you have to excel at everything all at once.
Hmm.
And as exciting as that sounds, it also is a very pressurizing situation. To know that there's no one goal in mind. There's no just one board exam that you have to clear.
Hmm.
There's no, one entrance exam that you have to clear. There's no one application that you have to file out. You have to ensure that you're in a good group of friends. You have to ensure that you're good with the
Hmm.
faculty. You have to ensure that you have your expenses in check, because now you're an adult. You have to ensure that your academics are proper. So I think the multitasking element, as much as I knew about it, I was not prepared.
Hmm.
I didn't know what it actually meant. So I think that was surprising.
You have to be like excelling at these like eight
Yeah,
different things versus just like doing well in school is not enough. It's like I also have to be like hanging out with inspirational people.
yeah.
Also have to be like taking care of my health. Bunch of other like verticals. So it's sort of I think in fact if I were to describe like what was difficult about the first year university is not like academic. I was coming from IB, so I was used to like academic intensity, but it's sort of like
Hmm.
everything at once. At home, if I take a break from
Yeah,
academics, that's like let's say watching a movie. Here, the moment like 4 hours of studying is done, it's like okay, I have to clean my room. Okay, I have to cook dinner. Okay, I have to like go
exactly.
do groceries. So it's sort of like work, but not only academic work. There's like a ton of non-academic
Yeah,
work which comes with like living alone. Um, yeah, I
yeah, I agree.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was. So I think the same for me. The academic pressure was not much, because when it comes to reading the textbook and when it comes to memorizing answers and just putting that down on a paper, I would like to believe that I'm sort of someone who can handle that.
Hmm.
But when it comes to, it's minute things. It's like, which color curtains do I pick out? What is appropriate? Does this room have better ventilation? Do I
Hmm.
keep my bed facing this way? Boundaries that I have to set with my own roommate.
Hmm.
Now I have a single room now, but then the first year of university, I was sharing my room with someone. And at times you might not get along with that person. They might end up becoming your best friend. And at times you do have a friendship, but you're not as involved in each other's life. So all of that, yeah.
Hmm. Any particularly challenging moments throughout the entire first year, which you're comfortable talking about on the podcast?
I think it was, there was nothing particularly challenging, but it was, I think, handling new experiences, even if it was just going for college fests,
Hmm.
even if it was going. So, the way I grew up and the kind of education I had, so I was in Vidyaranya before, up until my 10th grade. And that school was built around the philosophy that the only true competition you have is yourself.
Hmm.
And then when you come here, you understand that there are a limited number of opportunities. and a limited number of seats left in that opportunity, and
Mm,
everyone's out to get it. So
mm,
even if you're not trying to compare yourself to someone, and even if you're not trying to enter the same race, you inevitably will have to compete. You
mm,
will have to be in a position where you have to, sort of look at what the other person is doing. And
mm,
that'll become completely unintentional as well. You'll just probably just want to go get a cup of coffee and you overhear someone saying, "Oh, we finished studying this and we're doing this competition and we're going here." And then, your anxiety starts to kick in. I
mm,
think all of these new experiences, the amount of competition, the fairs, mood board competitions, ADR competitions, understanding that everything is now a race. It's no longer, you as an individual, your growth, but you have to ensure that you're also growing in the spectrum of other people. So
mm.
I think that,
Yeah, there's this whole journey with like imposter syndrome, and sort of comparisons. Um, I think there's like a positive and a negative way to look at it. Like on one end, I think it's the best way to look at it is to be inspired by people who you think who are achieving things which you currently feel like you're unable to achieve, and sort of sitting them down for a coffee and like just understanding how are they approaching things. But it's very easy to also go into like a negative hole of like the comparisons and sort of where am I going versus where are they going. What someone told me which really helped is sort of like your path is also slightly different from everyone else's path, and so I think also becoming clear on like what is my path, and how is that different from like their path is also like helpful, because if you're going in two different directions, the comparison also is like not necessary, in that sense. I
yeah.
I feel that homesickness is like a journey that is
Mm.
unique to everyone. Like everyone has their own journey with it. Plus, I think everyone's learnings and reflections from like this journey are different. And so let's hear like about your homesickness journey. Plus, like I'm assuming at now it's the second year you've been away from home for months, but like what has it taught you?
I think it's a sort of healthy detachment. And I don't mean this in a way that, I don't talk to my parents. Of course, I talk to them. I'm on video calls with my mom constantly and, things like that. But it's this level of knowing that if something were to go wrong here, if I were to have a bad day here, I can't run to my parents to console me anymore. I think I had that realization when I think there were two instances. I think when I felt sick for the first time
Hmm.
and I really needed, comfort is just having someone. So
Hmm.
someone just telling me that it's okay. If you miss 2 days of university, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Your attendance isn't going anywhere.
Hmm.
You just need to rest. You'll be fine. Giving me proper food,
Hmm.
things like that. And I think I didn't clear. We had this intra-university competition, and I didn't clear the researchers test for that, and I was very dejected because some of my classmates did, and everyone was trying to console people who didn't clear or get through. They were just like, "Oh, you guys are just first years. It's been 20 days since you came to college. You can't possibly expect to perform."
Hmm.
But I am a competitive person, and I like and I like being I like doing something that's good and something that'll make me stand apart. And I was feeling really dejected, but I couldn't run to my mom and be like, okay, you know what, this happened. I think I should have done this. The fact that I'm a single child. So the three of us, my mom, dad, and I, were each other's entertainment as well.
Hmm.
So if someone needs a good laugh or if someone, has something to rant about, we're usually each other's, support system. It's very easy for us to communicate because it is just the three of us. But, having to know that sometimes when you're here and when you're away, there's just a lot of space. And you don't know what to fill that space with
Hmm.
because now that they're not there, it's sort of like a temporary void, which inevitably you fill with work, you fill with friends. But the initial 1, 2 months, it's
Hmm.
a very horrible feeling. You feel like you're not a part of their life anymore. You feel like you're missing out on things that are, happening. You feel like, they won't call you and you feel like, you can't be weak in front of them as well because you understand the anxiety your parents are going through. So
Hmm.
you can't, tell them that, hey, I've had a bad day. You can't cry in front of them because that would get them worked up. That would get them worried. So it's really, as I said in the beginning, it's all about, finding sort of that inner balance and that strength. And I think that only comes after this 2 months of turmoil.
Hmm.
Yeah.
After about like once you were, let's say, 2 months in, do you feel like the homesickness started fading away, or is it like still
Yeah.
prominent, but you just learn to like deal with it? Which of the two do you think resonates more?
I think the second one, because there's never going to be a point where I'm not homesick.
Hmm.
I'm someone who's like, I love my city and I love my house, my friends, and, every aspect of it.
Hmm.
So it's more of a fear of that, you know, it's a fear of two things. It's a fear of how I will tackle things that are happening here that didn't happen back home, and things that are happening back home that I'm probably missing out on.
Hmm.
I don't want to go back after 4 months and know that, something happened and I wasn't there. There
Hmm.
was a celebration, or there was a time period where my parents really needed me, or they needed a good laugh, or they needed, some sort of entertainment,
Hmm.
or it was my dog's birthday, or things like that.
Hmm.
It in the long run, it seems very childish. It seems like, they're going to have tons of birthdays and they're going to have tons of celebrations. But it's
Hmm.
about that momentary guilt that you feel
Hmm.
because you're here because you wanted to pursue something.
Hmm.
It's not that they sent you away. You're here by your own choice because you wanted to make a career. And
Hmm.
you've chosen to put all of that aside.
Hmm.
So I think that guilt eventually transforms into, an understanding that eventually it will be fine. Eventually I am going to work it out. Or I always have them. Even if that's through a screen, I always have them.
It's interesting we brought up birthdays. I actually had like, now that I think about it, I think I felt like slightly guilty about celebrating my birthday away. Guilty and a little bit sad. Like it was not that easy to celebrate. This was probably the first birthday where I was like not at home. And also like this was after the semester ended, so it was like my conscious choice. But I was like traveling in DC and in New York because I wanted to do that before coming back to India. Um, what really filled the void for me, I think, was absolutely friends. Like making them, it's it's not that easy for friends to replace family. I don't think there's a point where they will, but sort of they are the best alternative to family. And so having them around me really made that like me like brighten that day up. And so I think even as a college student, when it's your friend's birthday, and especially when you know your friend is away from home, I think the least we can do is sort of make them feel special as well, and tell them that there's family around them, even though like actual family is, let's say, miles away or like oceans away for the international students going abroad. So yeah, I want to do. I want to go a little further on this mental health tangent with you. I think this is very important to speak about on the podcast. We're going to dive
Yeah.
into technicalities like law and LUO, but I want to actually touch upon this. I feel like this is more important to start with. Let's say it was like a bad day. A couple of things went wrong. You woke up in a bad mood. Too much work. Sort of had an argument with your roommate. It's been a bad day. And it's like 5 6 p.m. You're in a bad mood. When we're in a slightly bad mood, we run to mom and dad, and they sort of like bring our emotions up. But here, it's sort of you have to be bringing yourself up.
Yeah.
So let's say it's 5 6 7 p.m. on a bad day. How do you like flip the switch and get into a more positive mood, or like end the day on a happier note?
I think for me, I'm someone who takes my time because um, I I prefer not responding very instantaneously to situations because I feel like my responses also need to be sort of calm.
Hmm.
And if it is a bad day, it is 5 6 p.m. already. I can't do anything to fix my day.
Hmm.
So what I do is also I mull over things. I'm a huge, mulling over person. I
Hmm.
will lie in my bed. I will probably watch some, Friends for the 100th time, just something that is going to give me comfort. And I will mull over the fact that, oh, I've had a bad day and this has happened and that has happened. And I think for me it's that I get tired of the mulling over, and then I reach a point where I'm like, no, Daamia, you can't waste your time like this.
Hmm.
And then I call one of my friends and I'm like, hey, where are you? Are you at your room? And then I make sure that I'm surrounded by all of my friends.
Hmm.
And I try not bringing up the fact that I've had a bad day again and again, because it's not that I forget. It's just that for that time period, until I'm back to thinking rationally and having a better mood, I just want to keep it aside so that I've had my time to just be normal so that I can think about it. I can at least retrospect properly without having to feel bad about it.
Hmm.
I think that's my process.
Hmm. A very important skill I think I learned, and I think I'll keep improving over the next few years at uni is, let's say you had an argument with a friend in the evening and the next morning is like an important interview or an important exam.
Mm-hmm.
Also, sometimes there aren't like 5 6 days for you to get over like one bad day. It's like within a few hours you have to flip the switch, you have to get to work because tomorrow is a new day and you have something important coming up tomorrow which you can't miss. That takes a lot of time. I don't have sort of a process which I can explain. I think it's different for each person as to how they sort of flip the switch.
Yeah.
But you learn to do it much faster than like at home. At home, like if it was one bad day, I could spend 3 4 days sort of sulking, pouting, and slowly getting back. But at uni, it's sort of like you're on the move all the time, and it's sort of like within a few hours you flip a switch. Hopefully, at some point, this becomes like within like half an hour, I'm able to flip the switch, and I
Yep.
think that's great preparation for like even the world of work and like adulting as well. Um,
Yeah.
um, this is a question which I think for some reason I've never asked on the episode before. Now that I think about it, I have a lot of things to say here. So maybe I'll add on, but I think I'll pose the question to you first. How has your relationship with your parents changed since coming to university? Like over that first year, how did the
Hmm.
relationship change? And this could be like positives and negatives.
Um, Honestly, I think it's more of a that phase where like your parents are always trying to tell you that dear friends, don't treat us like parents. And that actually turns into reality when you're at university.
Hmm.
Because what happens here is that when you're back home and when you are not in a graduation course or when you're not at university, you're in a very, very sheltered environment. You
Hmm.
are not responsible for, let's say, your finances. You're not responsible for the things that you're purchasing. You're not responsible for tidying your room or
Yeah.
making sure that things such as your water bottles are clean,
Hmm.
or these tiny details, or whether you have enough sugar or salt in your room that
Hmm.
you don't starve one day. It's that when you see yourself stepping into the shoes of responsibility, I think your parents also notice you doing that.
Hmm.
And I think to some degree, as much as it also it hurts them to let go, but they like that period as well. I think I have now the best relationship I've had with my parents
Hmm. Hmm.
because I can talk to them about anything, because it's that we've reached a stage where they've had similar experiences in their lives and I'm going through those very experiences. And I don't hesitate in telling them things anymore. If there's something inappropriate happening at university, I do tell my parents, what, this child was caught doing this, and all of these gossip situations.
Hmm.
I love talking about that to my mom. My dad and I have a very, whether it's talking about career, I think it's a transition from them treating you as a child to them treating you as someone who's at par with them, because they realize that now you're going to go through the same struggles that still exist in their lives.
Hmm. Hmm.
Looking after your family, looking after your finances and your career, that's a never ending cycle for them as well. And I
Hmm.
think it's now that you're stepping into those shoes is that they can empathize with you more. It's more so about them changing their attitude than me changing mine towards that. I
Hmm.
think, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. A lot of what you're saying is bringing up memories for me. I don't even know if this is like a very good or a very bad thing, but at uni, I think I've had some of the best conversations with my parents and some of the sweetest moments. Also because, and this happened even when I came home for the summer and I'm spending the whole day with them. Is like we have time to do like a little bit of finding faults, a little bit of petty arguments, but over there when I was speaking to them for only 30 minutes in an entire day, it's sort of just a life update. What's going on with me? What's going on with you? The moment an argument starts, we sort of realize we don't have time for this. Like I have to go in 5 minutes. Let's talk about something more positive. Let's be like support systems. Um, yeah, I think it brings out like very positive aspects of the relationship, which were actually like sort of I think under the surface when all through when you were in high school. Also, I mean, to double down on the point you said about like them treating you as an adult, so sort of even you're like seeking advice from them, it's sort of many a times them leaving the decision up to me, which I think was like very empowering and which never
Yeah,
happened during any of my high school.
yeah,
It was like always they're happy to make the decision. So I really enjoyed this entire section. This was sort of a more emotional aspect of university, which I think like
yeah,
no one talks about. Like everyone is talking career and major and institution. These are very real, like day-to-day moments and the little aspects of university, which sort of I think make up the 4 years alongside those
yeah,
decisions you make and the big internships you do. So
yeah.
what we move on to now is some bigger decisions. And so what I'm going to do is rewind in time to sort of high school Danya and walk us through a few of the decisions you made. Also because this is a great like a sneak peek into your mind, which I'm hoping will help high schoolers listening in terms of getting valuable perspectives as to
Mm.
like they may not be on a path similar to yours, but I think the process of like choosing a major at a very high level, there are like some commonalities whether you're doing engineering or law or medicine or whatever. Um, as a middle schooler or a high schooler, walk us through how this passion for the subject of law developed and how what was the point where you were like clear that yes, this is what I want to do with the rest of my career.
Mm-hmm. Um, for me, it was I was always someone who wasn't. It was like an elimination process.
Hmm.
So you have all these options laid out in front of you, at least the conventional ones. That oh, either you're going into medicine, or you're going into engineering, or you're going into law, or you're going to pursue, a doctorate in this, and either you want to go into academia and things like that. So you have all these options laid out in front of you. And at least by the time when I was in my middle school and starting my high school, there were a variety of options. There was journalism, photography. I think the one thing my parents kept instilling in me was that as much as your profession and career is about, a source to earn income so that you can, just live your life in a better way with the luxury that you want and things like that. It's also about something respectable that you're doing.
Hmm.
It's about something that you take pride in and
Hmm.
you envision yourself doing. And my dad used to always tell me, I think even before I was, going to write the CLAT exam, he told me, you don't want to do law, it's fine. Do something that makes you happy.
Hmm.
Because and I'm someone who believes this. There is no point in having regrets about things like this because these are life altering decisions. These will, set a course to what you're going to do for the rest of your life. For me, I was a student who was never good at math. I used to have a fear of math, and I think I still do. I just cannot deal with numbers. I just can't.
Hmm.
And with science, I was fairly good at it, but it didn't really sort of, grab my attention as much. I was someone who was extremely inclined toward the arts, history or geography or civics.
Hmm.
Subjects like this, they truly gave me joy. Like I used to go, get books from the library to read about India's independence movement or things like that, or just study a little bit about politics or things like this. They were always interesting to me. And then once I finished my 10th grade and I had to choose a stream, I went with humanities. So my subjects were economics, sociology, political science, legal studies, and then of course we had English as a subject as well. So these subjects are very theoretical in nature. and
Hmm.
they're very subjective in nature as well because they're often based off of experiences or instances or opinions. And it's very difficult to, sort of what I liked was the fact that I could analyze. I could take something that someone had said and turn it into something, that was my own.
Hmm.
That is something that I related to a lot. And I once I cleared my 10th grade, I got to know about, if I have to pursue law, CLAT is the way that I have to go. Law as an option. I think my dad told me, he said that, if you really enjoy doing this, you should consider being a lawyer. I think while choosing this as my career option, I think my dad has been the biggest, influencing factor and someone who was slowly pivoting me in this direction.
Hmm.
Because I remember he has come home with, a contract. There was some work contract that he had. And he said, why don't you read through it? And I read through it and I realized, I went and told him, I said, Dad, I think the other people who are a part of this contract are really getting the sour end of the deal. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair. Because I feel like everything's falling upon them. And he just, he heard me and he laughed. He laughed a lot because he was not the party who was at the,
Hmm.
receiving end of it. And then I think he realized, he said that when you do have the ability to read and just to understand situations, you are empathetic, you know how to quickly analyze a situation and turn it into something that is, you know, that's your own. It's your voice, the way you're interpreting it. I think that's a skill that people who obviously use as a lawyer. Because half your job is just listening to what people have to say and understanding their story and their aspects and just turning it into something that, you can put out there and you can portray their side, putting aside your biases and your opinions and your thoughts.
Hmm.
So I think that was something, that my dad helped me a lot in that process. I think after 11th and 12th, once I joined Opal Reddy, it was very clear that if I do have to pursue law, CLAT is, at least in India, CLAT is the only exam that, is the biggest cycle out there, which churns out, students to law universities.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. And this is sort of one of my favorite questions to be asking because everyone has such a unique story as to how they stumble upon whatever they're majoring in at university. A lot of people, it's sort of in the blood. Like this is what my parents do. I love it because of that. A lot of people is like I stumbled across this somehow as a subject in school and now I love it. Um, I think these stories are interesting. It's I think it's interesting to think about if I were to sort of like take passion as this big word which you all use and sort of make it concrete, and this is a big hypothesis I'm making, is if I would ask myself the question on a Friday evening or like on a Sunday morning, if I couldn't be like watching a movie or partying or going out with friends, if I had to be sitting and working on a computer, what sort of work would I like to do? And so let's say off the top of my mind, what comes to my mind is like I would write or I would host an episode like this on the podcast. Those become like two of my big passions. In your case, as you said, like you very naturally just looked at that contract and were like, okay, this is what's going on. This party has a wrong deal. Versus, let's say, someone like me, I'm sure I would have just read it and be like, okay, cool. Like this was a dry, boring contract. So like stuff that others find like boring, which you find in weirdly or sort of there's an obsession. You find it interesting. You find it like you want to go deeper. I think like these are just a few like nudges I can give in terms of finding this big word of passion. Though it's a process, like for sure for everybody. Um, I was keeping account. You mentioned the CLAT three times in the last answer, and so I think we have to segue now into sort of the application 101 for law school in India. I'm assuming listeners to this podcast are have some vague idea of like what's going on, and so without getting too much into the weeds and the micro details, at a high level, can you walk us through the steps of preparing and applying for India Law School?
Okay. So the first thing that needs to be, set out right is there are public, like, law universities and there are private ones. So the public ones that most people would like to, see themselves in, they're national law universities and there are about 26 of those in India. And cumulatively, for all the law universities, there is an examination, an entrance test, which is the Common Law Admission Test or CLAT.
Hmm.
So what CLAT does is basically just testing your aptitude. It's a very basic test if you look at it in that sense because it is extremely reading intensive. It tests your general knowledge. It tests, basic quantitative skills, things like that. So, and your logical analysis, your coherence with what is going on, if you're given a passage to understand, to interpret, inherent. So, these are just the aspects of which the exam tests. So, now once you've chosen law as a career path and you want to go ahead with, going to a law university, I think the first step everyone takes in India is that you apply for CLAT. You register and you make sure you're present at the day of the examination and you give the exam. And then it's a rank system. So
Hmm.
based on the marks that you get in the exam, you're ranked. So there's rank one, rank two, and then the list goes up into like 30,000 depending on the number of people who've actually written the exam. So according to these ranks, you are then pushed, you automatically are put into universities, such as the best national law school in India right now is in Bangalore. So let's say it has about 240 seats.
Hmm.
So kids who have scored rank 1 to rank
Hmm.
240, National Law School Bangalore. 240 to say 360, Nalsar Hyderabad.
Hmm.
So according to your rank, you are automatically, you are given a preference list, which you do have to fill out.
Hmm.
So let's say, for example, your rank was 8. So you're ideally supposed to go into National Law University, Bangalore. But if your preference was, let's say, National Law University, Kolkata,
Hmm.
then you will be admitted to Kolkata.
Hmm.
So it's a fairly complicated process,
Hmm.
but I think at the moment this is the most, fair process that we have because there is no other way where there is no other singular method through which you can truly test the merit of a student.
Hmm.
And trust me, I have given the exam and I will say this. It is really not testing your merit.
Hmm.
It is not a test of your knowledge. It is not a determinant of how smart you are and how capable you are or how good of a lawyer you're going to become. It's just about how you perform in those 2 hours. And that's basically the process.
Hmm. For anyone like currently preparing for the JEE or the NEET or the CLAT, intense exams, I'm sure like those months and years are like grueling emotionally and mentally in terms of like staying sane and taking care of yourself, not sort of dropping out before you even reach the finish line. For anyone who's currently preparing for any of these Indian entrance exams, I want to give you an opportunity here to like give one message out to all of them.
It's I don't think I have much to say. It's just that understand that you're 17 and this examination is not something that's going to determine your entire life.
Hmm.
Because I'll tell you, I was like that. When I was preparing, the horse view
Hmm.
mentality.
Hmm.
Your horses have blinders and you only see down one path.
Hmm.
And you're so focused on that path that you forget everything around you. You forget that after that finish line or after that examination, you have your whole life in front of you.
Hmm.
So, what you need to remember is yes, you've put in the hard work. Yes, you've put in the hours. Yes, this probably means a lot to you and your family. This may be your last, hope that you can make a difference to your family or you can make a difference to your own life. Maybe you come from an underprivileged background and this education from a national law university matters the most to you. But this exam is not the end of it. And this exam is not a limit. You can give CLAT again. And after another year of preparation, you
Hmm.
can give NEET again, which most NEET people do anyways. All of them are just doing NEET for the second time.
Yeah.
Or JEE because because these are so tough. And they take exams like NEET and JEE, they take away essentially 3, 4 years of your life.
Hmm.
Because the level of preparation has to be such. And it's not about the content, it's just about how strong you are with it. It's that no matter what, algebraic equation is thrown towards you, you will be able to solve it within time on that day. You will be able to circle that little,
Hmm.
place in your OMR sheet, fill out that multiple choice question box.
Hmm.
But you have to remember that as much as those 2 hours matter, they really don't. They really, really don't.
Hmm.
It is, it's, it's a, it's a part of life. It's a very minute part of your life. It does not define the kind of person you are, neither does it define your intellect.
Hmm.
It's probably just testing your memory. It isn't even testing your knowledge.
Yeah.
So, the only purpose it serves is to make sure that if it's your day on that day, it just makes sure that it's not someone else's on that day as well.
Hmm.
It's just a process to eliminate the number of people.
Hmm.
And you have to have this realization.
Hmm.
It's not about you, but it's about everyone else.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not a test of your knowledge. It's not about how hard you work. It's about how unprepared the person sitting next to you was. And you were just lucky that day and you got through.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of it is beyond our control, and I think this is not just true of Indian universities. There are cycles where, let's say, Harvard has a higher, like a 10% acceptance rate, and there are years where it has like a 5% acceptance rate,
Yeah.
and there are years where like a lot of the applications are very strong, and there are years where the applications aren't so strong. There's so many factors outside of your control. I think it's just, as you said, healthy detachment. You said that in the context of like family and homesickness. I think I would use that phrase here, like detaching it from your abilities and your skills.
Yeah.
I know we're saying this from a more privileged position, but yes, there is a second chance for most people. I would hope so. But yeah, I'm glad we got this message out there. In your case, based on the ranking, was the number one preference for you also NLUO Odisha?
No. So my number one preference, obviously, it starts with the best. So in the NLU rankings, I think NLUO is the eighth best national law university right now. So according to my All India rank was 740. So according to that, I was placed at NLUO because I think that was my seventh or eighth preference. So it goes according to that.
Okay. And so you were
Yeah.
placed, and so you didn't have much of a say. You just sort of went there automatically because this,
Yeah.
based on ranking, this was the best possible university that you had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I'm also going to be asking this to. I'm going to get an IIT on the podcast in a few days. There's 23 IITs in India.
Mhm.
It's a question I'm going to be asking her as well. But in the context of law, what I will ask you is between the number one NLUO and the number like 20 or the number 25 NLUO, what actually is the difference?
I think it's just the difference of opportunities
Hmm.
because there are no set parameters. How would you judge a university? By its infrastructure, by the way its students are performing, by the quality of its faculty, by the opportunities it's presenting. So, National Law University Bangalore has the privilege and the upper hand that it is the first National Law University that was ever started. So, naturally, they've had about 20-25 years to, gather a good amount of resource pool.
Hmm.
So, I think it's just a difference of that. And I I'm not someone who is blind to the fact that yes, someone sitting in NLS Bangalore does have more opportunities than I probably do here.
Hmm.
But also understand that those opportunities are not available to everyone as well.
Hmm.
And if those opportunities are limited here, I have to be the one who has to be capable enough of grabbing those opportunities, even sitting at sort of, I wouldn't say an underprivileged position, but maybe not in the same position as them.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So you have to understand that these rankings are for the sake of convenience and not really for the sake of actually segregating the student based on who is smarter and who isn't.
Hmm.
Because again, even the ranks that you get out of the CLAT examination, I'm probably I'm not boasting about myself. let's say my friend here at National Law University, Odisha, is probably great at moot court competitions and ADR competitions and is flourishing here and is a better speaker as compared to CLAT rank 1, who is now in NLS Bangalore and is having a really tough time there.
Hmm.
So these rankings from the CLAT examination, these rankings of the university are purely for a convenience sake.
Hmm.
Yeah.
One last question on CLAT. I should have probably asked this a few questions ago, but I mean, better late than never. Um, there are tons of resources out there, so I don't want to be getting into like micro resource recommendations. But if you were to talk through this question at a high level strategically, do you think there are like tips and tricks or do's and don'ts which you want to share in terms of approaching the CLAT preparation strategically?
Mhm. Honestly, the one thing that, okay, as I said before, understand that CLAT is an examination that is very simple. I will not, you know, even compare it to JEE or NEET because there is no set syllabus. All you have to do, you just have to possess the skill of knowing how to read and comprehend English.
Hmm.
If you do that, then you've already mastered about 80% of the paper.
Wow.
It's just whether you're able to understand what's written between the lines,
Hmm.
how aware you are, how present you are, how well you're comprehending, how well you're analytically deducing what is in front of you in black and white.
Hmm.
Because yeah, there's just a bunch of words, but those bunch of words together having a meaning, then having a hidden meaning, how layered whatever the author has written there is. So these nuances are just what the examination tests. So
Hmm.
if you're someone who's an avid reader,
Hmm.
flat will be very easy for you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Another thing that, sort of pushes half the people out of the race is the time factor. Because there are about, I think there are 50 passages. No, I'm sorry. There are 50 pages. The exam sheet is of 50 pages, and you have 25 passages in it, which are of at least 500 words each.
Hmm.
And these can be English, these can be legal issue related, these can be logically issue related. So, out of these 25 passages, you have to complete all of this in a span of 2 hours.
Wow.
Read it, answer questions, make sure you haven't messed up your bubbling or circling or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And just having time to also review, also solve the maths problems, the 10 maths problems that are given to you. So all of this it's a very, time crunch situation. And I think that pushes most children out as well in the beginning. But what you have to understand in this exam is that you have to have consistency. It's not about how much you study. It's not about which textbook you're picking up to study. It's about if you have set that time for yourself that today, for 2 hours, I'm just going to sit and read this. I'm just going to sit and solve a bunch of math problems. You do it.
Hmm.
Take 2 hours of your time every single day. You sit at your desk. If you're bored, if you're injured, if you're sick, someone could be dying outside. It doesn't matter. You will sit there and you will complete your work and then go help that person.
Yeah.
It is just about having that grit and determination and that consistency. And to stick to your strategy on the D day, the exam day.
Um,
That's a mistake. I have no issue in even admitting that's a mistake I made. I did not stick to my strategy. I got phased, and then I started the paper with a different section. Stick to your strategy.
hmm.
If this is as much as a test of your personality as it is of your merit,
Hmm.
because how well you're able to hold yourself, how well you're able to stay confident in a losing battle,
Yeah.
because it is a losing battle. This isn't a fair situation. There
Yeah.
are 26 universities. There are about 200 seats in each university, and there are 75,000 to 1 lakh people writing this exam.
Wow.
When I was writing the paper, the ratio for one seat was one seat, 77 people are competing for the same seat.
Huh.
So this isn't a winning situation to begin with. This
Huh.
is already unfair. What you can do is how gracefully you're, even losing that battle. It's just about that. Whether how content you are with yourself, how confident you are,
Mm.
how you're able to just hold on over there and say that, look, hey, I know myself, I know my capabilities. It's 2 hours. Let me give my best in those 2 hours. It's not about how much you do that day. It's just the satisfaction that you gave your 100%. And that's all that matters.
Mm. I would agree. For me, it was the SAT grind. For others, it's
Mhm.
the ACT grind. I'm talking about US specific. I consider those also very much a test of nerves. And like we all know those people who are incredibly intelligent, but just don't do well on exams or don't do well on
Mhm.
like standardized tests. And I've always wondered as to why it is. I think part of the answer lies in the fact that they like lose their nerves or they lose their cool on
Yeah.
the day. So much of it is like on the day, keeping your cool, being confident. 5 questions you mess up, like leave it. Let's go to
Yeah.
the sixth. That's like a very emotional sort of angle to the CLAT. I think again not discussed enough. We do like this so much preparation for these 2 hours, and we don't spend like even an hour on like how do I stay cool during
Yeah.
2 hours and hold my nerve. Um,
Yeah.
those are also like some interesting numbers. Like those are shocking to me. So maybe no, maybe those are also shocking to listeners. Um, I think we've sort of broken down as much as we could the application process. We've also spoken about some other, like we had a first whole section on the emotions and the homesickness. We dove into the application. We got into why law school. What I want to do now
Mhm.
is fast forward in time and expand on this first year experience at NLUO. Dive into some specific details here. This is what I always feel is missing when I'm seeing like a day in the life video on YouTube is I'm not getting like specific details of like how does academics work and what do you do in your free time. That's the sort of at a macro level, this is what the
Mhm.
podcast aims to do. So we'll dive into some of those
Yeah.
very specific details. And sort of I'm hoping this gives a sneak peek for listeners as to let's say someone is on the path to law school, what can they expect to be doing day in and day out at law school? Um,
Right.
Very first question I'll start with, and I'm sure this will also lead to follow-ups, is can you say a little more about your course? So I know it's a 5 year course, a law course. However you want to like tackle this question, I don't know the
Mhm.
ABCs, but like for a beginner, what are you going to be studying over the 5 years?
Okay. So, the degree that I'm pursuing, it's a dual honors. So there are 2 degrees that I'll be getting at the end of this, one degree in BA and one degree in law. So it is a part of the integrated course. So before this integrated course happened, and it's over a period of 5 years. So before the system was started, it was that you finish your undergraduation and then you pursue law post, like proper law post graduation, year law programs, things like that. That was the conventional method before. But I think in the past 2 decades, this has been, a thing where you have to fire integrated course, and that's what people prefer nowadays. So the subjects that I have, they're a combination of law and the arts. So
Hmm.
I have 6 subjects per semester. For example, this semester my subjects are law of evidence, criminal law, criminal procedure, and these are my law subjects. And my art subjects are sociology, law, literature, and films, and economics, microeconomics. So
Hmm.
these are my art subjects. So it's a combination of both of these, and I have these six subjects spread out each semester. And my semesters are for a period of 4 months, and then we have an internship break of 2 months. So
Hmm.
effectively, your time at university is, give or take a proper 4 months.
Hmm.
That's about it. And the subjects are ranging from constitutional law or company law, and then after your third year, you have the option of choosing certain subjects that you want to sort of delve more into. Let's say insolvency or bankruptcy code, or you want to learn more about arbitrations in India. So you sort of go very subject specific as well. So that's how it works.
Got it. One big question that comes up for me is, let's say 4 years in or like 5 years in, I'm towards the end of my degree, I realize, okay, law is not really something for me.
Mhm.
Because I have this dual degree, I've also done like, let's say economics and sociology. Can I take a completely different path? And like, have you seen some
Yeah.
of those alumni do like completely unrelated things to law?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people jump into the judiciary. I mean, that would again come, it's not lawyer per se, but then it does come under the ambit of law. I think people jump also into the civil services.
Hmm.
So, IAS officers and IFS officers, that's something that I've seen a lot, especially around national universities. That's been a trend. And then there are also certain things such as journalism, public policy. There are a lot of things that you can dive into because essentially people also pursue company secretaryship
Hmm.
alongside doing law. So
Hmm.
what that does is it's just an added benefit. So you could very well be working in a corporate as a company secretary. You can have various varying job profiles. You could, start your own startups as well, something related to tech and law.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you don't have to go down the conventional method of I have to be a lawyer, I have to go sit in a fancy office, I have to do corporate law, or I have to go into litigation. There are a lot of things that can be done because the subjects and the area of study is so wide that you could jump into anything.
Hmm. I think if someone is like slightly turned off by the fact that like 5 years is a very long course, I feel like what you just said is like a huge benefit, which is similar to like
Mhm.
the benefit of let's say in a US university doing a double major. Like I do history,
Yeah,
I do computer science. I can go down either path, or I can find an
yeah,
interesting intersection between the two fields and sort of work there. So in terms of creating options, I genuinely feel like as a freshman university versus at your graduation, a lot of things will change in terms of your career interests and what you find interesting,
yeah.
regardless of how clear you think you are on day one.
Hmm.
So I think studying more subjects is always better. I'm also assuming that like even though law is like one bubble, economics and sociology and history and
Hmm.
literature all like are complementing subjects. So like studying those makes your law classes not easier, but you understand deeper as to what's going on. You
Of
build
course.
skills which
Yeah,
are implementing as well.
yeah.
Um, from what we've been discussing prior to the podcast, which I want to like get on record here, is that apart from just spending time studying and in class and doing exams, as a law student, you're involved in a lot of other interesting activities at university. And so you're talking to me about like mock courts and some other jargon which I honestly don't remember. But apart from sort of your time at your time studying and in class, listening to lectures, what are other avenues your university is giving you to like explore the field of law?
So as you said, there are mock courts or moot courts as we call them. So what that essentially is that it's just you mimic that you're in a court, you're arguing in front of, let's say, a tribunal or a bench of the High Court. You're given a problem and you then have to draft the arguments from both the sides. You will also, the complainant or the claimant, and you're also the respondent or the accused,
Mm.
depending on whatever the problem is, whether it's related to civil law, criminal law. So what this does is that these are all part of your practical experience because this gives you a sense of how it's really going to be out there. How the way you're supposed to present yourself in court, the etiquette you're supposed to have, the
Mm.
decibel at which your voice is supposed to flow, the
Mm.
way your arguments are supposed to be structured, your body language. You understand that when you're in court, you're sitting in front of a judge who has been sitting in his seat for, let's say, 5 hours that day. And he is really not in the mood to listen to you. He's really not in the mood to understand why you were not able to pay back a loan, even though you had money to give him back and you had XYZ reason. But no, sir, he said this to my wife, so I didn't give back the money, yada yada. He does not want to listen to that. Your ability to concise it, your ability to, be restricted to what the issue is at hand, things like this are tested, your practical experience. There are ADR competitions. So ADR is alternative dispute resolution. So these are mechanisms you can take apart from the courts. Mediation sessions, negotiations, arbitrations will all fall under ADRs. So over here as well, you have to understand that even when you're absent from the barrier of a court, how a client and their counsel and their lawyer is supposed to interact, how you're supposed to be mediating a situation like this. And understand that everyone can solve disputes on their own. This used to happen even in ancient times. You used to have one village panchayat. You used to have an old man as the head of the panchayat. He would pass a judgment. He would solve the dispute. There used to be familial dispute. All of these things, someone would step in, someone with a neutral objective, someone with the aim of just resolving the dispute. But the difference here is that you're working within the ambit of very specific laws. So the knowledge of this, the practice of this, all of these things are also tested. You could be making a lot of publications as well. You could be writing papers related to law or about any, India has recently had 3 new criminal laws that have come out, which have replaced our own criminal laws. News such as this, important changes that have happened related to our constitution. You could be making tons of publication. So one thing that law school will not let you do is let you sit idle
Hmm.
because there's always going to be something to do.
Sounds like it, for sure. And also,
Yeah.
I think these are very valuable, like the mock courts and these things you do outside of class, because as you said, nuances like body language and sort of the volume of speaking, being concise versus like going on long stories. I feel like these are skills that often we don't pick up in the classroom. And so the classroom is for sort of theoretical knowledge, ABCs, which are also like very valuable in law, I'm sure. But there's a completely like different and complementing set of skills which you can only pick up after having done like 10 mock courts, making 100 different mistakes, getting feedback, and then like, okay, now I know how to speak, now I know how to like be moving my hands, which is not like taught in a classroom in a lecture, I think. So I love when like theory is balanced with practical in terms of courses like law, because I think you can't have like one without the other. I'm sure you also like
Yeah.
go into mock court and you realize, okay, there's this XYZ concept I don't fully understand. Then you go back to class and you're like, okay, say more about this to your professor. Or like you
Mhm.
learn something in class and then in mock court, you're like, okay, this is where this applies in a court, in a real
Yeah.
life setting. So there's
Hmm.
like this constant interchange of information in that sense, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, as as a CBSE student, which is your background, like through middle school, through high school, any significant jumps which were made from those classes to the classes you're currently taking in law school in terms of like structure or difficulty or the way they teach?
Hmm. Not really, because so I was in the ICSE board until 10th grade. So I think the shift from ICSE to CBSE was something that was more difficult for me
Hmm.
than a shift from CBSE to university, because over here your subjects are, as I said, I've already done half of these subjects in school.
Hmm.
So sociology, political science, legal studies, economics, all 4 subjects that I was doing in school are also the subjects that I'm doing in law school. So, to be honest, it made the process much smoother for me. The basics of contract of law, law of contracts, or tort law, and things like this I'd already covered in legal studies. My microeconomics already finished in 11th grade. So, in fact, I think sticking to the CBSE syllabus and what I did and the subjects that I chose at that point of time, I think it was probably the best decision I made in view of what I'm doing in law school now.
Hmm. Interesting. In
Yeah.
fact, I think on any episode previously I've asked, I haven't had this answer of like high school prepared me decently well for university. Like every person has
Mm-hmm.
said that there was this jump and it was difficult. But I think
Mm-hmm.
this is like clear advice to like listeners as to like stick with the CBSE subjects
Yeah.
into them, and then you'll see law school as like a bridge. So like you're starting from something, and I'm assuming it builds up in terms of
Yeah.
difficulty and intensity over the months and years as well. But
Mm-hmm.
would you agree if I were to say like it was a good bridge for you overall? Like you felt pretty well prepared?
Yeah. Definitely. I think so. I was in a very non-conventional school. I didn't have all of these, restrictions that this is your deadline for submission, or this is the way you're supposed to frame your answers, and this is the way you're supposed to. It was a school that allowed me to think. Even if I make mistakes, that's okay. I learn through my process. But as nice as that is, for university, the CBSE school that I went to was absolutely perfect because it taught me things that, as much as you can take time and learn from your mistakes, sometimes you just don't have that kind of time in life. So
Hmm.
you just speed up the process. If there is, a method that is being given to you for the way you frame your answers or the way you write your projects, stick to it. Go by it. Yes, that is very conventional. Yes, you're not thinking out of the box, but what is being asked of you is also not that. You're supposed to be sticking to a very, very straight, metric of this is how you're going to be judged, this is how your marks are going to be awarded. Please stick to this. So I
Hmm.
think in those perspectives, CBSE's curriculum and the school that I went to it was the perfect bridge for university.
Hmm. What I want to do is tackle a slightly different aspect of your classes. This will also probably be relevant to someone not doing exactly law, but someone doing like anything technical or reading heavy as a course at university, which is, and I'm sure this is true, especially of you, even more than me as like an econ and a psychology major, that I'm sure a lot of your classes, the preparation is going through like very long, dense, dry and heavy, like PDFs, tons of jargon, very easy to like be disengaged and fall to sleep, not understand what's going on. And so at a high level, again, strategically, I want to break down with you, how do you approach like a dense reading and make sure you're able to like extract as much value from it as possible?
So I think this is a skill that CLAT tests as well. So it is about, segregating what is relevant and what is not. So
Hmm.
while you're reading, what you do is that once you skim through the paper, you understand that at this point the author has shifted the conversation to this. At this point, this turn has taken in the judgment. You highlight two, three keywords
Hmm.
and see the rest is that all of these are opinions written by someone. They use the same language as you. Their thought process is probably not, far from what you have been thinking or what you are aware. It's just about gaining that certain knowledge so that you can, infer and you can analytically, you know, break down the paper. It's not about memorizing the whole thing. Because it's humanly not possible.
Hmm.
Suppose you have an exam the next day and there is a judgment that you will have to read by the Supreme Court, which is like 150-page long. You can't humanly possibly go through each word and remember each line, what was said in which paragraph. What you have to understand and filter out is that this judgment was given to me to read in this context. So I will only read that context.
Hmm.
Now, from the examination point of view, if this is the topic that is relating to the judgment, think ahead. Try to understand what kind of questions can be thrown at you. Obviously, these are minute things that you have to do at your own level. Ask your seniors. This is where your networking in college comes to play the best because you have to have seniors who will give you their previous year question papers. You have to filter out. You have to understand what's varying between your syllabus and their syllabus. You have to understand that fundamentally, if a paper is talking about human rights, it will also talk about a lot of a lot of other aspects. It will cover a bit of criminal law. It will cover international law. But the crux of the paper, the soul of the paper is talking about how important human rights are. So while reading, understand this is where your comprehension and interpretive knowledge comes into play. Because you have to know what to read when.
Hmm.
It's not about reading the entire thing at all. You can skip the introduction. You know it's going to be irrelevant. It's just summarizing what's written. But you have to, let's say, specific words like privacy, dignity, liberty, bodily autonomy. If these are being talked about in a human rights paper, remember these words. Understand that this is what is being asked of you. It's not about what you are receiving from them, it's about what they're going to be asking from you.
Hmm.
Once you understand this dynamic, it's going to be very easy for you to read through all the papers.
Few pieces of that advice I think I'm doing well when preparing for my Minerva classes, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
few things you said which I think I can also like put into play because maybe this is my IB context, but for me, a big jump from high school to university was that at university, it took me like 2 hours, 3 hours to prepare for a single class. In terms of like, I'm expected to enter the class knowing at a high level what's going on, what are the concepts, what are we going to be talking about. versus like it's not the in high school it was like the teacher will begin with the ABCs. This is what we're doing today. In university, it's immediately like boom. Like you're expected to know the foundation, and then you sort of build on that in class. So like preparing for class is an interesting skill which you'll build at university. I think over practice, it's a learning curve. Plus, you also learn how to be efficient with it because you don't have like all the time in the world. If you
Exactly.
like prepare beautifully for each class, 4 hours each class, but you also have like other stuff to be doing apart from just in your textbooks all day. So, in like preparing for class such that you're very efficient, but also decently well prepared. Like you know what's going on, you're
Yeah.
not like blank on that day. That's like a balance, if I would describe it.
Yeah.
Another interesting aspect of your course, which we haven't had a chance to like dive into now, you also are like, I'm assuming you were talking about some of this in the future because I'm sure a lot of internships will come up over the 5 years and it's only been 1 year so far. But
Hmm.
tell us about how internships are sort of integrated into your 5 year course and what's the expectation like? What are you expected to learn or gain, or what's the value you're expected to find in internship?
Mhm. So for the law course that is set in India, it's actually a bar council mandate. So the Bar Council of India actually sets the syllabus that these are the subjects that you have to cover. These are, there are certain specific criteria that have to be met. Um, you have to have 10 internships in the entirety of the 5 years. So I've done two internships so far. My first internship was at the end of my first semester and the second at the end of my second semester. And both were very different and they taught me a lot. So the entire purpose of these internships is again practical experience.
Hmm.
Because as I've said before and like you said as well, studying law is very theoretical. It's just a lot of legal maxims, a lot of legal jargon, a lot of words on a paper, a lot of black and white, and it is intensely boring as well at times.
Hmm.
So you won't understand how the profession actually is from these papers.
Hmm.
You might gain your knowledge to use in the practical world from, all this theory, but you still need that essence of what the reality out there is.
Hmm.
I had gone to the High Court during my first internship. It taught me, it felt like I was entering a completely different world. And trust me, whatever they show you in these legal movies and these, law related shows, it's false. It really is false. You
Yeah.
need to go out there. You need to see for yourself that you can't just stand up and you can't say, objection, my lord. You can't say, you can't be extremely loud. You can't be, a judge might just dismiss your petition right as they receive it. Things like this do happen. Your patience is tested, your ability to sit in one place and make sure that your case is out there, your case is heard that particular day. One of these things, it's a very slow process. It's a very slow but definite process. So all of these things will only be understood through internships, and the more internships you do, the better. There is no pressure. It's just a limit of 10. You could do 10, we get 2 months of break. You could do two internships in one particular break. You'll have four internships already in one academic year. You could rush things like that as well. So what I would recommend is if you've gotten into law school and you are getting the opportunity just to even go sit in a district court somewhere near close by to your house, please go.
Hmm.
Please go and understand. Just understand that you know even if you don't understand anything related to the law, understand people who come there.
Hmm.
Someone from the village whose cow has gotten stolen
Yeah.
has come in there to argue his case and make sure that the person who stole the cow pays their fine.
Mhm.
It might sound very comical and it does not sound serious at all, but when you see the person there, when you see their plight, it might just be a cow, but for that person, it might be their source of income.
Yeah.
Things like this, these things of empathy, someone's company is in trouble. Someone, was wrongly pushed out of their company. Things like this, you have to go witness on a human level to understand why these matters actually need to be heard. Because as I said before, Any dispute can be resolved in just the four walls of a room. You don't need a court. You don't need a setup. But this is only if the world was ideal. And we don't live in an ideal world. Things are escalated. Things will inevitably, one will win, one will have to lose. You can also beautifully find a middle ground as well. But then, if everything were black and white, as much as law is a black and white profession, it is all about dealing with the gray. Yeah.
That's a good quote. Like if I were to, let's say, make a short of this episode, that would probably be one quote. Now, like law is a black and white profession, but it's all about shades of gray. That's an interesting way to approach it. Um, I love what you said about like understanding people, because many of my friends, even my seniors who have done internships, tell me that half of it is understanding the work and understanding the technicalities,
Yeah.
getting to knowledge, and the other half is like understanding company culture. How is a startup? I'm talking from like let's say a business point of view, but how is a startup different from a big company? How do
Mhm.
people work differently? How do people like interact differently? I see that coming through very clearly as a lawyer, being able to understand people as much as you understand like texts and understand what's going on from a theoretical point of view. I'm sure emotional management is a huge thing, like you sort of build up things you said, like patience and dealing with frustration. I'm sure internships help with that. Um, yeah, I think as we've done a deep dive into sort of your course here, I'll ask one question which is actually completely just a jump, unrelated. I think also very valuable to hear the answer to for all the potential law students, other students entering Indian universities. We enter university, and this is sort of the first time in many of our lives where the guardrails are like let off and you're on your own, you're autonomous. And so people are excited, I can do whatever I want. And like my parents were stopping me from doing this. I'm gonna do this the day on day one. Um, I think it's very easy to fall into like some dangerous traps, some bad habits at university. And so I want to ask you, in your experience at 1 year at NLUO, just observing your classmates, observing your seniors, what are some of these dangerous traps or bad habits that college students fall into?
Um, I think that first and foremost, the answer that anyone will give you is substance addiction. I think that's something that is extremely prevalent in, universities. Your mental health can cause a lot of issues as well. Anxiety, all of these factors, it eventually pushes into, you seeking an escape. And it's basically that. Or sometimes it's the fact that you just want to fit in. You
Hmm.
see everyone doing it, and oh, one puff from one cigarette, what harm could it do? And then you realize 25 years later you're diagnosed with lung cancer or something. So things like this do happen. It could just start as, a friendly group activity, and it could end up having large ramifications of your life that you probably don't see at the moment. Um, and I think that comes with a stage of maturity as well. But I think another bad habit or another bad cycle that people will fall into is that they want to do so much, so efficiently all at once that they think that they're constantly on this cycle
Hmm.
and they eventually burn themselves out.
Yeah,
And that happens into like your second or third year being in any university.
yeah,
Your need to excel, your need to be perfect
yeah.
can end up in such a bad cycle. And I think, it's all interconnected. Getting into the cycle of work, excel, perfect, pushes you into a pressurizing situation. And then you break. And then you seek escape in, substances, like alcohol or smoking cigarettes or, whatever it is, vapes. It can be anything. But I think in such situations, and this is what I mean that I'm one of the people who was fortunate that my childhood with my parents, the surroundings that I had, the people like you that I had in my life, and your parents, you guys, you know, we have been taught to hold our own. You know what I mean? The way we've been brought up, all of us have very strong personalities.
Hmm.
All of us have, that confidence in ourselves, and that reaches a point to where you're content.
Hmm.
You're content with how you are. You know that your acceptance into a friend group or your denial into a friend group can't be on the basis of whether or not you choose to drink that day or whether or not you choose to smoke that day. If that is your motivation, if that is, a factor in your peer pressure, then what really helps is the fact that you need to be content. You need to understand that these group of friends, these group of people eventually don't turn out to be your friends and you're completely lonely at university. That is okay. You will eventually find your people in life. Understand that as much as this is going to be your so-called home for the next 4 to 5 years, this is just a phase in your life.
Mm.
This you've come here for a specific purpose. You've come here for yourself to build your career, to gain certain knowledge, proceed further in life. This is not the end. So having friends here or having certain behaviors here or being popular or being, oh my god, I'm the it girl, that mentality just needs to be flushed out very quickly. And this kind of mentality is what, results into people being influenced that easily.
Mm.
Honestly, just have a mind of your own.
Mm.
You need to know that, especially our generation, my God, there is this horrible herd mentality where everyone wants to be doing the same thing. A trend comes out and everyone thinks that, oh, if I do this, I'm going to be cool. People are going to talk to me. All of this. No, really, no. That phase is going to go, and then people are going to figure out that, oh, this person is a bookworm and she stays in her room all day. She doesn't like to go out. She doesn't like to do this. It's also stop pretending to be something you're not.
Wow, yeah.
Knowing yourself, knowing yourself is very important. And even if you don't know exactly who you are, you should at least be determined to stay on the path to knowing who you are. The
Mm.
minute you sway from that is when you start being so easily influenced by people that you're going to lose track of where you wanted to go as a person. I don't just mean in academics, I mean in life in general. Academics, career is a very small aspect of it. But growing as a person is also something you have to constantly have in your head. That you don't do something that, Damia 10 years from now is going to look at 19-year-old Damia and going to be like, man, I'm disappointed in you. Had you
Mm.
not done that, I wouldn't have this regret.
Mm. Mm.
I didn't want to be disappointed in a 19-year-old Damia, but today I am. It's just about avoiding that feeling.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a very important point. All of your college friends have their whole world before university. Like they have their families, they have their high school friends. In my mind, it takes like a minimum of one semester, and for most people, probably a whole year before a friendship turns into like a very close friendship where where like you're among their top priorities. Also,
Yeah,
optimizing for different things at university. And so, let's say I felt bad when someone doesn't want to grab a coffee with me or have lunch. It then force people to like take a step back and think about what are this person's priorities at university, and maybe that's not like friendship and networking. Maybe they're like heads down and they have all these expectations and pressure on them. They have a different focus area. So also find the people for whom friendship is a priority, and I
yeah,
think that is generally becomes clear weeks in or months in terms of just where they're willing to
yeah.
devote time. I think is probably a good metric there. But
Hmm.
yeah, this is a really fun section. Friendship is like again a podcast in itself. Like there are so many
Hmm.
nuances, like university friendships,
Yeah,
they're very different from like the dynamics of high school friendships and middle school friendships. They're much more like mature and it's like adults becoming friends, and that's totally
yeah,
boundaries also become like a lot more important than like a high school friendship in my experience, at least. Sort of like
yeah.
you are your own two people with their own two lives, but sort of the paths have met somewhere along the way.
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
yeah. I think we've spent time on before university. We spent time on during university, which is your time at NLUO. I want to wrap up with our final section of each podcast, which is where we talk for a brief moment about after university. And so, after having come, I know this is a long way away, but whatever is sort of clear in your mind right now, what do you think is your plan after graduation, after the 5 years?
Um, so I do know that in, some place that I really would not want to step into litigation after I complete, law.
Hmm.
So it's mostly going to be sort of like a corporate job for me. And I also am considering pursuing masters abroad
Hmm.
because for the sheer fact that once you step into a different country, your growth as a person, even if it's for a year, it's a lot. The
Hmm.
experiences that you come back with, the knowledge that you come back with, and if I do end up getting into a good university, then the credentials that I'm going to be coming
Yeah.
back with will make a huge difference for my career. So I intend on working for a year or two, right after I graduate, probably look into pursuing masters abroad, and then see where it goes from there.
Awesome. I think it's time we jump into the fast fire round of questions. It's already been a decently fast paced, exciting conversation, but this is just my way to like wrap each episode up on a very exciting and fast paced note. So the fast fire round of questions is just a few quick questions I have for you. And the challenge in your case as a guest is to be answering in one phrase or one sentence at maximum. So just a quick back and forth. Um, we will start with, and this is something I'm going to challenge you on. As someone who's not a law student, as you said, we see movies and we feel like that is a good representation of the courtroom. As you said, most of them probably aren't. So I want to actually challenge you, even for the non-law students listening, to give us one Hollywood and one Bollywood recommendation of a movie or TV show that you think is a good representation of a courtroom.
So I think for Bollywood, there's this series on Netflix. It's called Mamla Legal Hai, and it's pretty accurate, and
Hmm.
it's super fun to watch. I think you should watch it honestly.
Hmm.
And for Hollywood, I think the Trial of the Chicago Seven
Okay.
was very accurate. Yeah,
Interesting. I love the trial of the Chicago Seven. I haven't watched the Bollywood series, but I'll check it out. I'll let you know how I like it.
yeah.
Um, Number two is you've moved from Hyderabad to Odisha. I'm sure there's so many new aspects, there's so many cultural shocks. What's one thing you like and one thing you dislike about living in Odisha?
I just like the weather. I think it's the weather. But I think the one thing I love is its vicinity, especially where my campus is located. It is extremely fresh and clean. The flora, fauna, there's just so much greenery around. Zero pollution. I think I just love the fact that when I breathe here, it's clean air.
Versus Hyderabad.
Yeah.
What's one book recommendation for someone listening who's potentially interested in going to law school and is interested in the whole field?
Um, I think there's this book. Uh, Actually, wait. I have the copy because this was given to me during my last internship. So it's this. The law of success, and it isn't just about pursuing a career in law, but I think anything that you want to do in life, any professional course that you want to take, I think this is the book that you should have a read once. And I think apart from that, you could read books like fiction books by John Grisham to give you an idea as to what you're really going into. But I think that's more of the American or Western way of looking at law. For India, there isn't something that I've come across, a book that I could recommend.
Okay. Awesome. No, I
Yeah.
think those are some good recommendations. Um, we've touched on a lot of positive aspects of NLUO. So far, it seems like you're very happy with the experience. I love asking the more twisted, darker other side of the coin because I believe there always is another side of the coin.
Yeah.
Any one big limitation or drawback, anything that has been less pleasant or enjoyable about your entire first year at NLUO?
I think sometimes the struggles that students face and the distance between, the faculty and the students. So
Mm.
I think that's about university in general. I wouldn't pinpoint that to NLUO
Yeah.
because this isn't school.
Yeah.
This isn't like, your parents are leaving you in the care of your kindergarten teacher. It really isn't. Your struggles are your own. As much as a faculty or a staff can help you out, it really isn't their place to step in anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that distance, that lack of hovering around sometimes can be detrimental.
Mm. Lastly, I'm sure you're very well updated with current affairs and what's going on. So I will read such things very closely. in India specifically? Is there any one current, like any specific geopolitical or legal issue which you think is interesting for even listeners to read up more on? Like you feel like this is a hot topic, everyone should know more about this.
Um, okay. So this is the first thing that's popping into my mind because there's been so much outrage on this recently. Um, and it is a very criminal and grave and heinous matter, but a woman was raped in Kolkata. And what a lot of people wouldn't know is that in India, the legal definition of rape itself cannot only includes that of a man.
Hmm.
So, and it includes only a woman at the receiving end of it.
Wow.
So there effectively is no protection for a man or for a woman abusing another woman. So
Mhm.
things like this, like that now, because this just recently happened. It was, a violation of your bodily autonomy. It was a heinous, grave crime. But I think but there is a safeguard for it because, she was raped by a man, let's say, at least there's a legal provision that she can approach to. But then, because the ambit is so limited, there are so many people out there who probably had to go through the same, heinous episode in their life or are still going through it. But they probably can't seek any relief.
Wow. That's insane. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, I think it's been a really great conversation. I've enjoyed it. Learned a lot of nuances about like law school and your course, the value of internships. I think we've covered a lot of ground, right from applications to like the present day, what you're pursuing and your plans for the future. If you had to wrap up this episode with one final message to listeners, somebody younger than you, somebody who's, let's say, about to get into law school, then pursue their career, any one final piece of advice or wisdom you want to leave listeners with?
I think it would be if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You're still you. Yeah.
Yeah, say a little more. Like, I feel like I want to hear a little more about that, even though I love what you said.
Uh, I think just understand that your life will not end at your career or will not end at university. And don't take it so seriously. There's a lot of universities out there who will accept you, who are going to give you the best of the facilities. Don't undermine, who you are for just having, something fancy to put on your LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And don't compromise on your values and the kind of person you are or the things that give you a happiness just so that you can have the tag or a degree of graduating from a particular place.
Hmm.
Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. As we begin wrapping up this episode, finally, I feel like I've said this like 5 times already, but we're actually wrapping up now.
Yeah.
If a listener is willing to connect or wants to follow up with you, someone who's interested in law school, wants to hear more about the application, what do you think is a good way to reach you?
I'm available on LinkedIn. So if you just type out my name and if you find me, I will for sure connect with you.
Oh yeah, I think to wrap up, thank you so much for your wise words on Uni Unveiled, and was a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Honestly. All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.